The shackles bit into Zara Hollis's wrists as her father dragged her onto the marble stage, and she knew with absolute certainty that this was how her life ended. The underground auction hall sprawled beneath an abandoned warehouse in downtown Seattle, all crumbling brick and flickering industrial lights that cast dancing shadows across faces she refused to look at. Faces of monsters, faces of men worse than monsters. Her father's calloused hand gripped her upper arm hard enough to bruise, and she stumbled in the ridiculous heels he'd forced onto her feet 3 hours ago when he'd shoved her into the back of his rusted pickup truck without explanation. She'd known he was a gambling addict. She'd known he owed money to dangerous people. What she hadn't known was that those dangerous people weren't entirely human, and that her father had finally found something valuable enough to settle his debts, his own daughter. "Gentlemen," the auctioneer announced, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. He was human, she thought, though his eyes held the dead quality of someone who'd sold his soul long ago. Our final item of the evening. 22 years old, healthy, unattached, and I'm told she's got the kind of spirit that makes the chase worthwhile. Zara's stomach churned. She'd tried to run twice on the way here. Her father had backhanded her the second time, splitting her lip. She could taste copper still, and wondered with distant hysteria if the smell of her blood was making this worse, because she could see them now in the crowd, scattered among the humans. Vampires. Their skin was so pale it seemed to glow in the dim light, hair white as bone, eyes that reflected the flickering bulbs like a cat's. They were beautiful and terrible, dressed in clothes that looked like they cost more than her father's house, and they were looking at her like she was dinner. "Starting bid is 50,000, the auctioneer said. 75, someone called immediately. 100, 150. The numbers climbed, and Zara felt something break inside her chest. Her father stood beside the auctioneer now, practically vibrating with relief and greed. He wouldn't look at her. Couldn't, probably. She hoped whatever money he got burned him. She hoped it destroyed him the way he was destroying her. 500,000, a new voice said, and the room went silent. Zara's head snapped toward the back of the hall where a figure had just entered through the main doors. Even among vampires, he stood out. Taller than the others, moving with a liquid grace that made her breath catch despite her terror. His hair fell past his shoulders, white and straight as a blade, and he wore a black suit that probably cost more than most people made in a year. But it was his face that made her knees weak. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, full lips set in an expression of cold disdain as he surveyed the room. And his eyes. God, his eyes were the color of old blood, dark red and infinite, and when they landed on her, she felt the impact like a physical blow. "King Yorath," the auctioneer stammered, actually bowing. "We didn't expect you to attend personally. King." The word ricocheted through Zara's mind. This vampire was royalty. This was so much worse than she'd thought. Yorath Nocturne moved through the crowd, and it parted before him like water. No one dared meet his gaze. He climbed the stairs to the stage with predatory ease, each step deliberate and terrifying, and stopped 3 feet from where Zara stood shaking. "This is the girl?" His voice was deep, accented with something old European that she couldn't place. Not quite English, not quite anything else. "Yes, your majesty," the auctioneer said quickly. "Healthy stock, no prior claims, father's willing to sign all necessary paperwork. I wasn't asking you." Yorath's eyes never left Zara's face. "What's your name?" She should probably stay quiet, should probably be meek and compliant. But rage was burning through her fear now, hot and bright and reckless. "Does it matter? I'm livestock, apparently." Something flickered in those red eyes. "Amusement? Interest?" "It matters," she bit out. "Zara Hollis, Zara." He said it slowly, like he was tasting it. Then he turned to the auctioneer. 500,000. Do I have any competition?" The silence was deafening. Apparently no one competed with the Vampire King. "Sold," the auctioneer said weakly. Yorath pulled out his phone, made a single call, spoke a few words in a language Zara didn't understand. "The money will be in your account within the hour," he told the auctioneer. Then his gaze slid to Zara's father, who'd been cowering at the edge of the stage. "You, come here." Her father shuffled forward, unable to refuse a direct command from something so much more powerful than himself. Yorath moved faster than Zara could track, suddenly gripping her father by the throat and lifting him off his feet. Her father made a choking sound. Legs dangling. "If I ever," Yorath said softly, and the quiet was somehow more terrifying than shouting, "See your face again, I will tear you apart so slowly you'll beg for death long before I grant it." "Do you understand?" Her father managed a jerky nod. Yorath dropped him. He crumpled to the floor, gasping. "Get out of my sight." Then the Vampire King turned to Zara, and before she could move or think or breathe, he'd bent and lifted her into his arms. She made a startled sound, automatically grabbing at his shoulders to steady herself. He was solid as stone beneath the expensive fabric, and cold. Not dead cold, but cool like marble in shadow. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Taking you home." He was already moving toward the exit, carrying her like she weighed nothing. "I'm not going anywhere with you. You just bought me like a piece of furniture. Would you prefer I left you here for one of the others?" He nodded toward the crowd of vampires and humans watching with various expressions of envy, anger, and hunger. "I assure you, my intentions are considerably less violent than theirs would be." Zara looked at the faces staring back at her and felt ice slide down her spine. No, she definitely didn't want to stay here. But going with this vampire king didn't seem much better. They emerged into the Seattle night, rain misting down from a dark sky. A car was waiting, sleek and black and expensive, driver holding the door open. Yorath set Zara carefully in the back seat, then slid in beside her. The door closed with a heavy thunk that sounded too much like a cell door locking. "Take us home, Marcus," Yorath told the driver. The car pulled smoothly away from the warehouse. Zara pressed herself against the far door, as far from the vampire as the confined space allowed. Her wrists ached where the shackles had been. Someone had removed them while Yorath carried her, she realized. She hadn't even noticed. "I'm going to be sick," she said suddenly, and meant it. The adrenaline was crashing, taking her stomach with it. Yorath immediately pressed a button, and the divider between front and back lowered. "Pull over." The car had barely stopped before Zara was fumbling with the door, stumbling out onto the rain-slick sidewalk. She made it 2 steps before her legs gave out. Strong hands caught her before she hit the pavement, steadying her while she dry-heaved into a storm drain. She had nothing in her stomach to bring up her father. Hadn't let her eat since yesterday, but her body tried anyway. When the spasms finally stopped, she found herself sitting on the wet curb with a vampire king crouched beside her, one hand still on her back. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking through her thin dress, plastering her dark hair to her face. "Better?" Yorath asked. Zara laughed, and it came out broken and slightly hysterical. "Better? I was just sold at auction to a vampire. My own father traded me for gambling debts. Nothing about this is better." He was quiet for a moment, rain running down his pale face, soaking into his white hair. "No," he said finally. "I suppose not. Come, you'll catch cold. Why do you care?" His red eyes met hers, and she saw something there she couldn't quite read. "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but I do. Come." She let him help her back into the car, because she didn't have any other options. Her mind was spinning through possibilities, each worse than the last. What did vampires do with humans they bought? She'd heard stories, whispers, blood slaves, worse things. She was shivering now, cold and wet and terrified. Yorath shrugged out of his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. It was still warm from his body, or at least not cold, which confused her. She thought vampires were supposed to be ice cold. The jacket smelled expensive, like cedar and something darker she couldn't name. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. "Forgive me if I don't believe you." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "That's fair." They drove in silence through Seattle's rain-washed streets, heading north out of the city. Zara watched the lights blur past, trying to memorize the route in case she got a chance to run. The buildings grew sparser, replaced by trees and darkness. 40 minutes later, they turned onto a private road that wound up into the hills above Lake Washington. The house mansion really appeared through the trees like something out of a Gothic fever dream. All stone and tall windows, architecture that shouldn't exist in modern Seattle but somehow did. Lights glowed in some of the windows, warm against the night. The car pulled up to the front entrance and stopped. Yorath got out and offered his hand. Zara ignored it, climbing out on her own. Her wet heels clicked on the stone steps as he led her through massive wooden doors into an entrance hall that made her breath catch despite everything. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a palace. Everything was decorated in deep colors burgundy and black and gold, and it was somehow both modern and ancient at once. "Your Majesty," a woman appeared from a side hallway, older, human, dressed in simple but expensive clothes. "We prepared the blue room as you requested." "Thank you, Catherine." Yorath gestured for Zara to follow him up a curved staircase. She did, because what choice did she have? The blue room turned out to be a bedroom suite larger than her father's entire house. The walls were painted a soft slate blue, the furniture dark wood, the bed enormous with what looked like silk sheets. There was a fireplace with actual logs burning. Rain-spattered windows overlooking dark trees and darker water. "The bathroom is through there," Yorath said, pointing to a door on the left. "You'll find clothes in the closet. Catherine will bring food shortly." Zara turned to face him, trying to make herself seem braver than she felt. What happens now? Now you get cleaned up and eat something. That's not what I mean. He studied her for a long moment, his red eyes unreadable. I know what you mean. The answer is nothing. Nothing happens now. You're free. She stared at him. What? Free. He moved to the fireplace, one hand bracing on the mantel, his profile sharp in the firelight. You can stay here as long as you like, no obligations. Or you can leave whenever you want. I'll have Marcus drive you anywhere you wish to go. I'll set up an account in your name with enough money to start over. Whatever you need. I don't understand. Her voice came out small. You just paid $500,000 for me. Yes. And now you're just letting me go? Yes. Why? He turned to look at her fully, and the expression on his face was complicated. Old, tired, because no one should be bought and sold like property, because your father is a monster and you deserved better, because I could, and therefore I should. He moved toward the door. Get some rest, Zara. We'll talk more tomorrow. Wait! The word burst out before she could stop it. He paused, hand on the doorknob. What's stopping me from just leaving right now? Running? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Nothing. But it's raining, you have nowhere to go, and you haven't eaten in at least a day based on how you reacted in the car. Practically speaking, staying the night is your best option. But the choice is yours. It will always be yours. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Zara stood in the middle of the enormous blue room and tried to process what had just happened. A vampire king had bought her at auction and then set her free. Just like that. It didn't make sense. There had to be a catch. There was always a catch. But her body didn't care about catches or scents. She was exhausted and freezing, and still wearing a soaking wet dress that clung to her skin. Almost on autopilot, she moved to the bathroom. It was predictably stunning, all white marble and gold fixtures, a tub that could fit 3 people, a shower with multiple heads. She started the shower running hot, then peeled off the wet dress and heels with shaking hands. The hot water was heaven. She stood under the spray until she stopped shivering, then found expensive-looking soap and shampoo and scrubbed herself clean. Scrubbed away the warehouse, the auction, her father's betrayal, until her skin was pink and raw and she felt almost human again. The closet, when she finally worked up the nerve to look, was full of women's clothes in her size. That should have been creepy. How did Yorath know her size? But right now she was just grateful. She found soft leggings and an oversized sweater, both in dark colors that felt like camouflage. Her wet hair she braided loosely over one shoulder. A knock at the door made her jump. Yes? Catherine entered with a tray. I brought soup and bread, she said kindly, setting it on a small table near the windows. Nothing too heavy, since I suspect you haven't eaten properly in a while. Thank you. Zara moved to the table, and the smell of the food made her stomach clench with sudden, desperate hunger. She sat and picked up the spoon with trembling hands. Catherine lingered. I know this must be terrifying for you, she said gently. But King Yorath truly means you no harm. He's a good man. Well, vampire, but good. How long have you worked for him? 20 years. He saved my life once, and I've served him ever since. Catherine smiled. Sleep well, dear. If you need anything... There's a phone on the nightstand. Dial 0 and it will reach my quarters. Then she was gone too, and Zara was alone with soup and questions. She ate slowly, letting the warmth spread through her body, and tried to think. She'd been to college 2 years of community college before money got too tight, and she'd had to drop out. She'd been working as a waitress at a diner downtown, living in a studio apartment, and avoiding her father as much as possible. That life seemed like years ago now, instead of just this morning. The vampire world had always existed on the edges of her awareness. Everyone knew they were real. They'd revealed themselves about 50 years ago, tired of hiding. There were laws now, treaties between human and vampire governments. They were supposed to coexist peacefully. But there were also rumors of a dark underbelly, illegal auctions, blood dens, humans who went missing. Her father had apparently found his way into that underworld, and he dragged her down with him. Zara finished the soup and moved to the windows. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. Lights glowed from other parts of the mansion, reflecting on the dark lake far below. She could run, find a phone, call a cab, disappear into the city. But Yorath was right. She had nowhere to go. Her apartment had been in her father's name, and he'd probably already cleaned it out to pay more debts. Her friends were few and far between. She had maybe $300 in her checking account. And if she was being honest with herself, she was curious. Why had the Vampire King done this? What did he want, really? Because no one paid $500,000 for nothing. The bed was absurdly comfortable when she finally crawled into it. The sheets were silk, the blankets heavy and warm, and within minutes exhaustion dragged her under into mercifully dreamless sleep. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and had a moment of pure disorientation before memory crashed back. The auction, Yorath, freedom, supposedly. She sat up, heart pounding, and checked the door. Unlocked. The phone was still on the nightstand. Everything was as it had been. Another knock, and Catherine entered with a breakfast tray. "Good morning. I hope you slept well." "What time is it?" "Nearly noon. You were exhausted, poor thing." She set down the tray, coffee, eggs, toast, fruit. "King Yorath asked if you would join him in his study when you're ready, but there's no rush." Zara ate breakfast slowly, marshalling her courage. Then she dressed in jeans and a soft blue sweater from the closet, braided her hair again, and ventured out of the room. The hallways were less intimidating in daylight. She could see now that the mansion was decorated with art paintings and sculptures that looked old and expensive. Windows overlooked manicured gardens and the lake beyond. She found her way back to the main staircase and stood at the top, uncertain. A man appeared at the bottom, young and dark-haired, clearly human. "Miss Hollis? I'm James, one of the household staff. His Majesty is in the East Wing. I can show you if you'd like." She followed him through more hallways until they reached a heavy wooden door. James knocked, opened it at a command from within, and gestured her inside. The study was exactly what she would have expected. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture, a massive desk near windows that looked out over the lake. And Yorath, standing at those windows with his back to her, wearing black slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His white hair was tied back with a leather cord, exposing the elegant line of his neck. He turned when she entered, and she was struck again by how beautiful he was, inhumanly so. Like a Renaissance sculpture come to life, all sharp lines and pale perfection. "Zara, thank you for coming. How are you feeling?" "Confused," she said honestly, a slight smile. "I imagine so. Please, sit." She took one of the leather chairs facing the desk. He sat on the edge of the desk itself. Close enough that she could see his eyes weren't quite solid red. There were flecks of darker crimson, like garnets. "I promised we would talk," he said. "So, questions. Why did you buy me?" "Because I won't allow such things to happen in my territory. Your territory." "Seattle, the entire Pacific Northwest," he said calmly. "From the Canadian border to Northern California. It's been mine for 200 years. Zara's mind reeled. 200 years. "And vampire kings just go around buying people at illegal auctions?" "No. Usually I shut down the auctions entirely. But last night I was informed too late to stop it. I only knew about it an hour before it started. I arrived intending to arrest everyone there." His expression darkened. "But then I saw you on that stage, and the way your father looked at you, and I changed my plans. So you bought me instead. I couldn't leave you there. The auction would have continued after I left with the arrests. Someone else would have purchased you. Someone with far worse intentions." He leaned forward slightly. "I bought you to free you, nothing more." "Just like that. Just like that." She studied him, looking for the lie, the trap. Found nothing but calm certainty. "You really expect nothing in return?" "I expect nothing, though I have a proposition if you're interested in hearing it." There it was. The catch. "I'm listening." Yorath stood, moving to a cabinet and pulling out 2 glasses and a bottle of what looked like very expensive whiskey. He poured 2 fingers in each glass, offered her one. She took it, more for something to hold than because she wanted alcohol at barely past noon. He returned to the desk. "My world is complicated," he began. "Being king means constant politics, power struggles, alliances that shift like sand. Other vampire nobles, human government officials, rival territories. I've been king for a very long time, and I'm good at it. But there's one area where I've always been vulnerable. What's that? I have no queen, no consort. In vampire society, that's seen as a weakness. It suggests I can be tempted, manipulated through romantic overtures, blackmailed through lovers. For 2 centuries, I've avoided entanglements precisely because I refuse to give my enemies that leverage. But the perception of weakness remains." Zara set down her glass. "You want me to be your queen?" "No. I want you to pretend to be involved with me. A public relationship, a romance, something to make me appear settled and unswayable." He said it matter-of-factly, like he was discussing the weather. "You would live here, attend events with me, play the part of my lover. In exchange, you'd have safety, luxury, and a substantial salary. When you're ready to move on 6 months, a year, whenever I'll set you up anywhere you want with enough money to start whatever life you choose." She stared at him. "You want to fake date me. Essentially." "Yes, that's insane, is it?" He tilted his head. "You need safety and resources to rebuild your life. I need the political advantage of appearing romantically engaged. It's mutually beneficial. Why me? Why not find some vampire noble who'd actually want the position?" "Because vampire nobles actually want the position," he said quietly. They would see it as real, expect it to become real, demand things I'm not willing to give. You're human, temporary, and you owe me nothing beyond what we agree to. It's cleaner this way. Zara picked up her whiskey and downed it in one burning swallow. The absurdity of the situation was almost funny. Yesterday she'd been sold at auction. Today a vampire king was offering her a fake relationship and a salary. Her life had become a surreal nightmare, but he wasn't wrong about her needing resources. And if this was fake, if there were clear boundaries and an end date, maybe it wasn't the worst option. Better than running back to a city where she had nothing, looking over her shoulder for whatever enemies her father had made. What exactly would this involve? She asked carefully. Yorath relaxed slightly, like he'd been more tense than he appeared. Public appearances. Dinners, galas, court functions. We'd need to seem comfortable with each other, casual physical affection, that sort of thing. Nothing private, nothing beyond what you're comfortable with. You'd have your own rooms, your own space, and we'd establish ground rules, boundaries, safe words even. Safe words? I want you to feel completely in control of this arrangement, he said seriously. If anything makes you uncomfortable, you say the word and we stop immediately, reassess, adjust. This only works if you feel safe. She searched his face. He seemed sincere, but then again he'd lived for over 2 centuries. He probably could fake sincerity very well. How long would this last? As long as you're willing. 6 months minimum would be ideal to make it believable. After that, we can stage a quiet breakup and you move on. And if I say no, then I'll have Marcus drive you wherever you want to go, transfer money into your account, and wish you well. The offer of help stands regardless of your answer to this proposition. Zara stood, moved to the windows. The lake sparkled under afternoon sun, boats cutting white trails across blue water. It was beautiful here. Safe. And she'd be lying if she said the idea of making her father's betrayal mean something didn't appeal to her. He'd sold her like trash, and here she could become a queen. Fake queen, but still, there was a certain poetry to it. What if people find out it's fake? She asked. They won't. I'm very good at keeping secrets. What if I mess up? I don't know anything about vampire politics, or how to act at galas, or any of that. I'll teach you. We'll take it slow. She turned to face him. What if I develop actual feelings? The question surprised her even as she asked it, but it seemed important. Something flickered across Yorath's face, too fast to read. Then we'll deal with that if and when it happens. But I should be clear, I'm not looking for a real relationship. I can't offer you that. Because you're a king? Because I've lived too long and seen too much. His voice was quiet, almost sad. I don't know if I'm capable of that kind of connection anymore. The honesty in that statement made her decision. He wasn't lying to her or trying to manipulate her into something messy. He was being straightforward about what he could and couldn't offer. That was more than most people gave. Okay, she said. I'll do it. 6 months minimum, fake relationship, clear boundaries. I want the terms in writing, and I want to be able to walk away if it becomes too much. Yorath's smile was genuine this time, and it transformed his face from beautiful to devastating. Done. I'll have the contracts drawn up today. Welcome to the court, Zara Hollis. They shook on it, his hand cool and solid in hers, and Zara tried to ignore the flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with fear. The next 2 weeks were a crash course in vampire politics and royal etiquette that made Zara's head spin. Catherine proved to be an invaluable teacher, coaching her on everything from which fork to use at formal dinners to how to properly greet vampire nobles based on their rank. Yorath himself taught her the history of the territory, the major players in his court, who could be trusted and who needed to be watched. She learned that vampires couldn't go out in direct sunlight. It wouldn't kill them immediately, but it was like being burned alive slowly. They were strongest at night, feeding on blood but not requiring it daily like mythology suggested. Once a week was sufficient for most, more for younger vampires. They could eat human food too, though they didn't gain nutrition from it, only pleasure. They were fast and strong and could live indefinitely if not killed, and killing them was hard fire and decapitation were the only sure methods. She learned that Yorath's court consisted of about 40 vampires of various ranks, plus 100 or so human staff and companions. He ruled from this mansion, which served as both his private residence and the court's meeting place. There was a vast underground section she hadn't seen yet, where the vampires who couldn't stand even indirect sunlight made their homes. And she learned that Yorath was respected and feared in equal measure. He was fair but ruthless, protective of his territory, and those under his protection, unforgiving to enemies. He'd been king since he was barely a century old, having challenged and defeated the previous king in single combat. That was rare. Most vampires didn't have the nerve to go after a crown until they were much older. Why did you do it? she asked him one night. They were in the study again, her with a book on vampire law, him working through correspondence. Challenge for the crown so young? Yorath looked up from his papers. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm over the past 2 weeks, spending evenings in comfortable silence or quiet conversation. The previous king was corrupt. He allowed the abuse of humans in his territory, looked the other way when nobles broke our laws. I couldn't stomach it. So you killed him. So I killed him, he agreed calmly, and took his throne and spent the next century cleaning up his mess. Do you regret it? He considered the question. No, but sometimes I'm tired. 200 years is a long time to be responsible for so many lives. Zara set down her book. Can you give up the crown? Just walk away? Theoretically, yes. I could abdicate, name an heir, leave. But who would I give it to? Most of the nobles in my court aren't suited for the responsibility. They'd either abuse the power or lose control of the territory within a decade. And if I simply abandoned it, there would be a power vacuum. Other territories would invade, or my nobles would tear each other apart fighting for dominance. The humans under our protection would suffer most. So you're trapped. I prefer to think of it as committed, but his smile was wry, acknowledging the truth in her words. What about you? What did you want to do before your father destroyed your life? No one had asked her that in a long time. I wanted to be a teacher. Elementary school, maybe. I like kids, and I'm good at explaining things in ways that make sense, she shrugged. But I had to drop out of college, so that dream died a while ago. It doesn't have to stay dead, Yorath said quietly. After this arrangement ends, I meant what I said about setting you up. If you want to go back to school, I'll pay for it. Consider it part of your compensation. Something warm bloomed in Zara's chest. Thank you. You're welcome. Their first public appearance together was a gallery opening in downtown Seattle. Vampires and wealthy humans mingling over wine and art. Zara wore a dress Catherine had helped her pick out deep green silk that made her skin glow and her dark eyes stand out. Her hair was loose for once, falling in waves down her back. She felt like an imposter playing dress-up. You look beautiful, Yorath said when she met him at the base of the stairs. He was devastating in a black suit, his white hair loose around his shoulders, red eyes warm as they took her in. Ready? Terrified, she admitted. He offered his arm. Then we'll be terrified together. Just stay close to me and follow my lead. You'll be fine. The gallery was packed with people who were definitely not fine, or rather, not human. Zara could pick out the vampires now, all pale skin and white hair and predatory grace. They turned to watch as Yorath entered with her on his arm, conversations stuttering to silence. Your Majesty, the gallery owner gushed, hurrying over. Human, Zara noted. We're so honored by your presence, and you must be Miss Hollis. Welcome, welcome. The next hour was a blur of introductions and careful conversations. Yorath kept her close, one hand resting on the small of her back, occasionally leaning in to murmur explanations or warnings in her ear. She met Lord Cassius, Yorath's second in command, a vampire with sharp features and sharper eyes who looked at her with open curiosity. Lady Isadora, who wore diamonds and condescension in equal measure. Marcus Thorne, a human businessman who apparently donated heavily to vampire-human relations causes. So how did you meet our elusive king? Lady Isadora asked, her tone suggesting she already suspected the answer. Zara had prepared for this question. At a charity event, she said smoothly. We got talking, and he surprised me. I bet he did, Isadora murmured, eyes flicking between them. Yorath's hand tightened slightly on Zara's back, a warning or support, she wasn't sure. Careful, Isadora. Jealousy isn't attractive. The vampire woman laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of course, Your Majesty. When they finally left the gallery hours later, Zara felt like she'd run a marathon. Yorath must have sensed it because he told Marcus to drive around for a while rather than heading straight home. They sat in comfortable silence as the city lights blurred past. You did excellently, Yorath said finally. Natural and poised. I'm impressed. I felt like everyone could see right through me. They couldn't. And even if they suspected this is new, so what? Relationships are always new at the start. He shifted to face her. You're going to be fine at this, Zara. Better than fine. She wanted to believe him. Lady Isadora doesn't like me. Lady Isadora doesn't like anyone. Don't take it personally. Was she one of the ones you were worried about? The nobles who would see a relationship as leverage. Yorath's expression darkened. She tried, years ago. I declined. She's held a grudge ever since. Lovely. Court politics are never lovely. He reached over and took her hand, the gesture casual but sending electricity up her arm. But you're not alone in this. I've got you. His hand was cool but not cold, solid and strong, and Zara found herself holding on tighter than necessary. This was supposed to be fake, she reminded herself. Professional. But the way Yorath looked at her in the darkened car, the way his thumb brushed over her knuckles, felt entirely too real. Over the next month, they settled into a routine that felt almost normal. Public appearances every few days, dinners, court functions, theater performances. In between, Zara continued her education in vampire politics while also starting to explore her own interests again. There was a library in the mansion that rivaled most universities, and she spent hours there reading everything from vampire history to modern literature she'd missed. Catherine introduced her to the household staff, and she found herself becoming friends with several of them, particularly James and a young woman named Sophie who worked in the kitchens, and there was Yorath himself. They spent most evenings together, sometimes in the study, sometimes walking the grounds after dark when he could be outside. He was easy to talk to once you got past the whole Vampire King thing, intelligent and surprisingly funny in a dry way. He asked about her life before, seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts on books and politics and everything else. She found herself looking forward to those evening conversations more than she wanted to admit. The physical affection required for their public charade was getting easier too. Yorath was always careful to ask permission before touching her, but as weeks passed, his hand finding hers or settling on her waist started to feel natural, comfortable. She caught herself leaning into him at events, seeking out his presence in crowded rooms. Once, at a particularly boring dinner, he'd leaned over to whisper a sarcastic comment about the speaker in her ear, and she'd had to stifle laughter in her wine glass, their shoulders shaking together. It felt like more than fake. It felt like friendship, at least. And sometimes when he looked at her with those red eyes, warm and intent, it felt like something else entirely. 5 weeks into their arrangement, everything changed. They were at a formal court dinner, held in the mansion's grand ballroom. 24 vampire nobles and their companions, plus select human guests, all dressed in their finest. Zara wore midnight blue silk and sapphires Yorath had given her, her hair pinned up in an elegant twist. She was standing with a group discussing human-vampire business relations when she felt a prickling awareness that someone was watching her. She turned and found a vampire she didn't recognize staring at her from across the room. He was tall even for a vampire, with the usual white hair pulled into a severe knot, red eyes that held nothing warm or kind, and he was looking at her like she was prey. Zara excused herself and moved toward where Yorath was speaking with Lord Cassius. He saw her coming, read something in her expression, and immediately broke away. "What's wrong? There's someone here I don't know." Tall, hair in a knot, looking at me strangely. Yorath's expression went cold and hard. He scanned the room, found who she was describing, and his hand landed on her waist, pulling her close. "Shit! What? Who is he?" "Lord Draven. He rules the Northern California territory. We're not exactly friendly." Yorath's jaw was tight. "Stay close to me. Don't let him get you alone." But it was too late. Lord Draven was already crossing the ballroom toward them, moving with liquid grace, other guests parting before him. He stopped a few feet away and offered a smile that showed too much tooth. "Yorath, how long has it been?" "Not long enough, Draven." Yorath's voice was cool, his body angled protectively between Zara and the other vampire. "I wasn't aware you'd be attending tonight. I'm full of surprises." Draven's red eyes slid to Zara. "And who is this lovely creature? I've heard rumors the great King Yorath has finally taken a lover, but I had to see for myself. This is Zara, my companion. Zara, Lord Draven rules the territory south of mine." Zara forced herself to meet Draven's gaze. "Pleased to meet you. The pleasure is entirely mine." He reached for her hand. Yorath moved faster, intercepting, and suddenly the two vampires were standing too close, tension crackling between them. "Touch her and I'll remove your hand," Yorath said softly. Draven laughed. "So protective. How fascinating. I've never seen you like this over anyone." His gaze returned to Zara, assessing and hungry. "She must be very special." "She is. And she's under my protection, which means she's under the protection of this entire territory. Remember that. Of course." Draven stepped back, spreading his hands in mock innocence. "I meant no offense. I was simply curious about the woman who finally captured your attention. Enjoy your evening." He melted back into the crowd, but Zara could feel his gaze on her for the rest of the night. Yorath didn't leave her side, his hand constantly at her back or holding hers, his body a barrier between her and the rest of the room. When the dinner finally ended and the guests departed, Yorath led her straight to his study and closed the door. He paced to the windows, radiating tension. "What was that about?" Zara asked. "Draven is ambitious. He's been trying to expand his territory for decades, and he sees mine as prime real estate. We've had several conflicts over the years." Yorath turned to face her. "If he thinks you're important to me, he'll try to use you as leverage. That's why I reacted the way I did. I needed to make it very clear that you're off limits. Is this going to be a problem? Because we can end this now. Before no. The word came out fierce. We're not ending this. I won't let him win by making me change my life. But we need to be more careful. You don't go anywhere without security. James or Marcus will accompany you any time you leave the mansion. Yorath, I'm not actually your lover. You don't have to. Yes, I do. He crossed to her, taking her shoulders gently. You're under my protection, fake relationship or not, and Draven is dangerous. Promise me you'll take this seriously. She looked up at him, at the genuine worry in his eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. I promise. His hands slid down her arms, catching her hands. They stood there for a moment, close enough that she could feel the cool emanation of his body, see the flecks in his red eyes. I won't let anything happen to you, he said quietly. I know. Security increased after that night. James accompanied Zara on her rare trips into the city. Yorath had vampire guards posted around the mansion perimeter, and he himself was more present, spending even more time with her, always aware of where she was. It should have felt suffocating, but instead Zara found it comforting. Safe 3 days after the dinner, she was in the library when Yorath found her. Walk with me? He asked. It was well past midnight, the mansion quiet. They went outside into the gardens, walking paths lit by subtle ground lights. The night was clear, stars bright overhead, the sound of the lake a distant whisper. Yorath had his hands in his pockets, his white hair loose around his shoulders. I've been thinking, he said after a while, about this arrangement. Zara's heart skipped. What about it? When we started, I thought it would be simple, professional, but it's not anymore, is it? She stopped walking. He stopped too, turning to face her. What do you mean? I mean you've become my friend, Zara. Somewhere in the past 6 weeks, I started looking forward to seeing you every day. I started caring about your opinions and your happiness. That wasn't supposed to happen. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. He ran a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. I told you I wasn't capable of real connection anymore. I believe that. But then you happened, and now I'm not sure what I believe. Zara's pulse was racing. Yorath, I'm not asking you for anything, he said quickly. I just wanted you to know that this isn't fake for me anymore. The friendship part, at least. You matter to me. She stepped closer, drawn by the vulnerability in his voice. You matter to me too, do I? He searched her face. Or is this still just an arrangement to you? She should say yes. Should keep this professional, maintain boundaries, protect herself. But she'd never been good at lying, and she couldn't start now. No, it's not just an arrangement. It hasn't been for a while. Something flared in his eyes. Hope, maybe, or fear. He reached up slowly, telegraphing the movement, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his cool hand cupped her cheek. Tell me to stop, he said softly. Tell me this is a bad idea. It's probably a terrible idea, she whispered. But I don't want you to stop. He kissed her. It was gentle at first, questioning, his cool lips moving against hers with careful restraint. But when she made a soft sound and pressed closer, his control slipped. His other hand came up to cradle her face, and he kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning, like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for centuries. Zara's hands found his chest, feeling solid muscle beneath expensive fabric, then slid up to tangle in his white hair. He made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, their bodies flush, and she could feel the barely restrained strength in him, the careful way he held himself back from crushing her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. This complicates everything, he said. I know. Are you sure you want this? Want me? Because I'm a vampire, Zara. I'm going to live centuries more while you grow old. I'm dangerous, and I have enemies who will use you against me. This isn't a fairy tale. I don't need a fairy tale. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I need you to be honest with me. Do you want this? For real? Yes. No hesitation. More than I've wanted anything in a very long time. Then we'll figure out the rest as we go. He kissed her again, softer this time, like a promise. When they finally walked back to the mansion hand in hand, everything had changed. The next few weeks were complicated and wonderful and terrifying all at once. They kept the change in their relationship quiet, not because they were hiding exactly, but because they both needed time to figure out what this meant. Zara's feelings for Yorath were deepening every day, moving past friendship and attraction into something that felt dangerously close to love. And he was different with her now, more open, more tactile, more present. He'd touch her constantly in private, small gestures, like brushing hair from her face, or pulling her close on the couch while they read. He'd tell her about his past, stories from his human life in medieval England and the early years of his vampire existence. She'd share her dreams, The childhood she'd mostly been happy in before her mother died and her father fell apart. They were building something real, and it was beautiful and terrifying because Zara knew it couldn't last. Human lifespans were so short compared to vampires. She'd be dead within 60 years if she was lucky, while Yorath would continue on, immortal and unchanging. The thought of leaving him made her chest ache, but she pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the present. On late night walks through the garden. On dinners where he tried human food just to make her laugh at his reactions. On nights when he'd hold her close and kiss her like she was precious, like she mattered in ways he'd forgotten things could matter. 2 months into their real relationship, Draven struck. Zara had gone into Seattle with James for a coffee and to pick up some books she'd ordered. She was waiting outside the bookshop while James went to get the car when someone stepped up beside her. She turned, expecting James, and found herself face to face with Lord Draven. "Hello again, Miss Hollis." Ice slid down her spine. "Lord Draven, I'm waiting for someone. I know. This won't take long." His smile was cold. "I have a message for your lover. Tell Yorath that if he wants to keep his territory, he'll meet me at the old warehouse district tomorrow night, alone. Otherwise, I start killing his people one by one until he has nothing left to rule. That's insane. He will if he cares about you." Draven moved closer, and Zara found herself backed against the bookshop wall. "You see, I've been watching. This isn't just an arrangement anymore, is it? He's genuinely attached, which means you're leverage. He'll kill you if you touch me. He'll try. But I'm very old, little human, and very strong. And I've been planning this for a long time." He leaned in, close enough that she could smell something metallic on his breath. "Deliver my message. Tomorrow night. Alone. Or people start dying." Then he was gone, melted into the crowd, and James was pulling up in the car looking confused about why she was pressed against the wall. Zara climbed in with shaking hands and told him to get her home immediately. Yorath was in a meeting when she burst into the mansion. She didn't care. She went straight to the council room where he was conferring with Lord Cassius and several other nobles, and the moment he saw her face, he was on his feet. "Everyone out," he commanded. They left immediately. He crossed to her, taking her shoulders. "What happened?" She told him everything. With every word, his expression grew darker, more dangerous. By the time she finished, his eyes were practically glowing with rage. "He threatened you directly. He threatened everyone. Yorath, you can't go meet him alone. It's obviously a trap. I know it's a trap." He was pacing now, radiating fury. "And he's right that I can't ignore it. If I don't show, he'll make good on his threat. He'll start killing humans under my protection, maybe even staff here at the mansion, and he'll make sure I know it's because of my refusal. So what do we do?" He stopped pacing and looked at her. "We call his bluff." "What?" "He expects me to show up alone and unprepared. So I'll show up with an army. Every vampire loyal to me, armed and ready. If he wants a war, I'll give him one he can't win." Lord Cassius returned at Yorath's summons, and within an hour the mansion was organized chaos. Vampires being armed, plans being made, alliances being called in. Zara felt useless in the middle of it all until Yorath found her in the library and pulled her into his arms. "I need you to stay here tomorrow night," he said into her hair. "I'll have guards with you, and Catherine and the staff. If something goes wrong, nothing's going to go wrong. You're going to be fine." He pulled back to look at her, and the emotion in his eyes made her breath catch. "If something does go wrong, I need you to know something." Don't do this, Zara." He cupped her face in his cool hands. "I love you. I didn't think I was capable of it anymore, but I do. You've brought light back into a life I'd resigned to being shadows. Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know that." Tears were streaming down her face. "I love you too, which is why you have to promise me you'll come back. I promise I'll do everything in my power." He kissed her, soft and desperate. Everything. The next night felt like the longest of Zara's life. Yorath and what seemed like half his court left at sunset, all grim faces and weapons. She was left in the mansion with Catherine, James, Sophie, and a handful of vampire guards who looked like they'd rather be at the fight. She tried to read, to watch TV, to do anything to distract herself. Nothing worked. At midnight, Catherine made tea. At 1, James tried to get her to eat something. At 2, she was pacing the study, wearing a path in the carpet. At 3, the door opened and Yorath walked in. He was covered in blood, his white hair stained red, his clothes torn. But he was alive. Zara ran to him and he caught her, lifting her off her feet, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. She didn't care. She was crying and he was murmuring into her hair, words in English and other languages she didn't understand. "What happened?" she finally managed to ask. "We won. Draven's dead. His followers either fled or swore loyalty to me. It's over." She pulled back to look at him. "Are you hurt?" "Nothing that won't heal." I was more worried about getting back to you. He set her down carefully. I need to clean up. Then we need to talk. 20 minutes later, he returned in clean clothes, his hair washed and tied back. He looked exhausted in a way she'd never seen before. She was sitting on the couch, and he sank down beside her, pulling her close. Draven wanted my territory because he was building an empire, Yorath said quietly. He'd been conquering smaller territories for years, always careful to avoid direct conflict with someone as established as me. But he got greedy, and he thought you were the weak point he could exploit. He was right, wasn't he? I am a weak point. No, he turned to face her. You're not a weakness. You're the reason I fought as hard as I did tonight. Knowing you were here, waiting for me, made me stronger. He took her hands. But this isn't over. There will be other Dravens, other threats. Being with me will always put you in danger. Her heart sank. Are you ending this? I'm giving you a choice. His red eyes were intense. I can set you up somewhere safe, far from vampire politics. Give you the life we originally agreed on. Or you can stay, and we can build something real together, knowing it will be complicated and dangerous, and you'll always be a target. That's not really a choice. Isn't it? She smiled through fresh tears. No, because I'm not leaving you. I love you, and I'm not afraid of complicated. Relief flooded his face. Are you sure? Because once I have you, really have you, I'm not letting go. I'll protect you with everything I am for as long as you live, and then what? I grow old and die while you stay young forever? His jaw tightened. I've been thinking about that. There's a way if you want it. I could turn you, make you vampire. We'd have eternity together instead of just decades. The offer hung in the air between them, enormous and terrifying. Zara had never seriously considered becoming a vampire. It was permanent, irrevocable, would change everything about what she was. But the alternative was living a human lifespan, while the man she loved continued on for centuries without her. I need time to think about that, she said finally. It's a big decision. Of course. There's no rush. Take whatever time you need. He kissed her forehead. I'm just grateful you're staying. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. Finally, he spoke again. Will you stay with me tonight? Just to sleep, I mean. I need to know you're close. Yes. His bedroom was on the same floor as hers, but larger, decorated in deep blues and blacks that somehow felt warm. The bed was enormous, and when they lay down together, he pulled her close, her back to his chest, his cool body a solid presence behind her. She could hear his unnecessary breaths, feel his hand resting over her heart, and she'd never felt safer. Thank you for coming back, she whispered into the darkness. Always, he murmured against her hair. I'll always come back to you. She believed him. The weeks following Draven's death were busy ones. Yorath had to deal with integrating Draven's former territory, managing the vampires who'd sworn new loyalty, reinforcing alliances with other territories who'd been watching the conflict nervously. Zara helped where she could, playing the role of queen consort that was no longer fake. She attended meetings, offered perspectives, learned the deeper intricacies of vampire politics, and somewhere along the way she realized she was good at this, good at diplomacy, at reading people, at finding compromises that worked for everyone. You're a natural, Lord Cassius told her one evening after a particularly difficult negotiation. I wasn't sure about you at first, but you've proven yourself. The king chose well. It was the closest thing to a compliment she'd heard from the usually stern vampire, and it meant more than she expected. 3 months after the fight with Draven, on a clear autumn night, Yorath took her back to the garden where they'd first kissed. The trees were golden and red, leaves falling like rain, and he looked nervous in a way she'd never seen. I have something to ask you, he said. Okay? He took her hands, and she realized his were actually shaking slightly. These past months with you have been the happiest of my very long life. You've made me remember what it means to be more than just a king, to be a person with hopes and feelings and someone to come home to. And I know we've only been together a short time by vampire standards, but I'm centuries old and I've never felt this way about anyone. He was getting down on one knee, and Zara's heart stopped. He pulled out a small box and opened it to reveal a ring, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, beautiful and antique and perfect. Zara Hollis, will you marry me? Will you be my queen, not just in name but in truth? Will you share whatever time we have, whether that's decades or centuries? She was crying again, nodding before she could find words. Yes, yes, of course yes. He slid the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that felt like a beginning. When they broke apart, both grinning, she said, I've made a decision about the other thing too. What other thing? Becoming vampire. I want to. Not right away. I want to experience our wedding as human, and maybe a few years of mortality. But eventually, yes. I want forever with you. The joy on his face was incandescent. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. They were married 3 months later in the mansion's ballroom, with both vampire and human guests in attendance. Zara wore a dress that made her feel like a princess, white silk and lace with sapphires sewn into the bodice. Yorath wore black with silver embroidery, his white hair bound with silver cord, and when he saw her walking down the aisle, she watched his eyes fill with red-tinged tears. The ceremony was a blend of human and vampire traditions, presided over by a vampire elder who'd known Yorath for over a century. When they exchanged vows, Zara's voice only shook a little. I promise to stand beside you through danger and peace, to be your partner and your friend, to love you as long as I exist in whatever form that takes. Yorath's vows were simpler but no less powerful. I promise to protect you, cherish you, and love you beyond reason for as long as I walk this earth. When they kissed, the room erupted in applause, and Zara felt something settle in her chest. This was right. This was home. The reception lasted until dawn, vampires and humans dancing and celebrating together. Her father didn't attend. She'd made sure he knew he wasn't welcome, had even gotten a restraining order to keep him away. She had a new family now, one she'd chosen, and they were better than anything blood could have given her. 5 years passed in happiness that Zara had never dreamed possible. She took online classes and finished her degree, started volunteering at a local elementary school. Yorath's territory continued to thrive under their joint rule, and they became known for their fairness and the unprecedented cooperation between vampires and humans in their region. They traveled when they could, seeing places Yorath had visited centuries ago and places new to both of them, and every night they came home to each other, to stolen moments in the garden, quiet evenings in the study, conversations that lasted until dawn, to laughter and arguments and making up, to a love that deepened with every passing day. On their 5th anniversary, Zara made her final decision. I'm ready, she told Yorath over dinner. I want you to turn me. He'd been expecting it, preparing for it, but his hand still trembled as he took hers. It will hurt. The transformation takes 3 days, and they're not easy. I know, but I want forever with you. I want to see centuries with you, to keep building this life we've made. Then we'll do it tonight. He raised her hand to his lips, and I'll be with you every moment. The transformation was every bit as painful as he'd warned. Yorath's venom burned through her veins like fire, remaking her from the inside out. He stayed with her the entire time, holding her through the worst of it, murmuring reassurances and love in languages she didn't understand. Catherine and the staff kept her comfortable, changing sheets and bringing cool cloths for her burning skin. On the 3rd day, she woke to a world transformed. Everything was sharper, clearer, more vivid. She could hear the house settling, smell dinner cooking 3 floors down, see individual dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. And she was strong when she sat up. The movement was effortless, her body responding with new grace. Yorath was sitting in a chair beside the bed, watching her with anxious hope. How do you feel? She looked down at her hands. They were paler now, taking on the porcelain quality all vampires had. When she found a mirror, she saw that her dark hair had white streaks threading through it, not completely white like born vampires, but marked by her transformation. Her eyes, though, were the biggest change. They'd shifted from brown to a deep red, like garnets. I feel incredible, she said honestly. Is it always like this? The heightened senses fade to normal after a while, but the strength, the speed that stays. He stood, moving to her side. Are you hungry? She realized she was, but not for food. There was a different kind of hunger gnawing at her, something primal and new. I need blood. He'd prepared for this too. He'd arranged for donated blood from the hospital, stored specially for her first feeding. He taught her how to drink without gorging, how to savor and control the instinct that screamed at her to drain the bag dry. It was strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Over the following weeks, he taught her everything else. How to move with her new speed without breaking things, how to control her strength so she didn't accidentally hurt humans, how to manage the sunlight sensitivity. She could tolerate indirect sun or heavy shade, but direct sunlight was still agony. How to hunt when she was ready for fresh blood from a willing donor. She was a quick study, eager to master her new nature, and she loved the advantages it brought. She could spar with Yorath now without him holding back. She could attend full vampire court sessions without exhaustion. She could see centuries stretching ahead of them, full of possibility. 10 years after her transformation, Zara stood in the same garden where Yorath had proposed, looking out over grounds that had become as familiar as breathing. She wore simple clothes jeans and a sweater, her hair loose down her back, white streaks now fully integrated with the black. She heard Yorath approach before she saw him, his footsteps soundless but familiar. You're thinking loudly, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She leaned into him, just reflecting. 15 years ago, my father sold me at an auction. I thought my life was over, and now I'm queen of the Pacific Northwest vampire territory, married to the love of my life, with centuries stretching ahead of us. She turned in his arms to face him. My father thought he was throwing me away. Instead, he gave me to the one person who would truly value me. I didn't free you from those chains just so you could put on different ones, Yorath said seriously. You know that, right? You're not bound to me out of obligation. I know. I'm bound to you because I choose to be. Every single day, I choose you. He kissed her, soft and sweet, and I choose you, for as long as we both exist. They stood there as the sun set behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. In the distance, the mansion glowed with light, full of people who depended on them, trusted them, loved them. It was a responsibility and a privilege, and they bore it together. Eventually, they walked back toward the house, hand in hand, their white hair gleaming in the twilight. There would be challenges ahead, there always were, politics and threats, and the endless work of maintaining peace in their territory. But they would face it together, king and queen, vampire and vampire, partners in every way that mattered. Zara thought about the girl she'd been, terrified and alone on an auction stage, and the woman she'd become. She thought about her father, wherever he was, and found she didn't hate him anymore. His worst betrayal had led to her greatest happiness. He'd thought he was selling her into slavery, but instead he'd inadvertently given her freedom to become someone stronger, to find love she'd never imagined, to build a life beyond anything she'd dreamed possible. What are you smiling about? Yorath asked as they climbed the steps to the front door. Everything, she said simply. Absolutely everything. Inside, Catherine had dinner, waiting human food for nostalgia, and warm blood for sustenance. They ate together in the small dining room they preferred for private meals, talking about their plans for the week, laughing over some bit of court gossip. It was domestic and normal and perfect. Later, in their bedroom with moonlight streaming through the windows, Yorath pulled her close, and she could feel his unnecessary heartbeat against her cheek. I love you, he murmured into her hair. My queen, my salvation. I love you too, she whispered back. My king, my home. And there, wrapped in the arms of the vampire who'd bought her freedom and then given her his heart, Zara fell into peaceful sleep, knowing she was exactly where she belonged. The shackles that had once bound her wrists were long gone, replaced by the willing bonds of love and partnership. She'd been sold to the highest bidder, but she'd been freed by his love, and together they'd built something beautiful out of tragedy. In the end, her father's betrayal had been the beginning of her real life. The life where she wasn't a victim or a commodity, but a queen and a partner and someone powerful in her own right. The life where she'd found love that would last literal centuries, where every night brought new adventures and every day reaffirmed her choice. Years turned to decades, decades to centuries, and through it all, Yorath and Zara ruled together. They saw technologies change and societies evolve. They weathered conflicts and celebrated victories. They watched human friends grow old and said goodbye, with tears and grace, even as they themselves remained unchanging, and through everything they had each other. The vampire king and his queen, bound not by obligation or transaction, but by love freely given and endlessly renewed. What had started as a fake arrangement had become the truest thing in both their long lives. Sometimes, late at night when the mansion was quiet and they were alone, Zara would remember that auction hall, the terror and despair. The moment Yorath had walked in and everything had changed, and she would look at him, her husband, her partner, her love, and feel nothing but gratitude for the strange twists of fate that had brought them together. What are you thinking? He'd ask, because he always knew when her mind wandered. That I'd go through it all again, she'd answer honestly. Every terrible moment, if it meant ending up here with you. And he would kiss her, soft and reverent, and hold her like she was precious, because to him, she was. She always had been, from the moment he'd seen her on that stage and known he couldn't leave her there. He'd paid in full for her freedom, never expecting anything in return, and somehow gained everything that mattered. They were proof that even the darkest beginnings could lead to the brightest endings, that love could grow in unexpected places, that sometimes being saved meant finding the strength to save yourself, with the right person standing beside you. And so they lived, king and queen, vampire and vampire, two souls who'd found each other in darkness and built a light that would never fade. The auction that was meant to destroy Zara had instead delivered her to her destiny. Her father had sold her for money that was long since spent and forgotten. Yorath had bought her freedom and given her a kingdom, a crown, and a love that would outlast empires. In the grand story of their lives, that night in the warehouse was just the beginning, the first chapter of an epic that would span centuries. And if you asked either of them, they'd say it was worth every moment. The pain, the fear, the uncertainty. All of it worthwhile for the happiness they'd found together, because sometimes the highest bidder turns out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. Sometimes being bought means being freed, and sometimes a vampire king's greatest treasure isn't his territory or his power, but the woman who chose to stand beside him and call him home. Their story became legend in Vampire Circles. The king who freed a human from slavery and married her, the human who became a vampire queen and helped broker lasting peace between their species. Young vampires heard the tale and dreamed of finding such love themselves. Humans learned of it and found hope that even in darkness, good still existed. But for Yorath and Zara, it wasn't a legend. It was simply their life, complicated and beautiful and entirely theirs. They'd chosen each other again and again through every challenge and change, and they would continue choosing each other for all the centuries to come. And somewhere, in a forgotten corner of Seattle, an old warehouse stood empty and decaying, the site of illegal auctions long since shut down. If those walls could speak, they'd tell the story of a night that changed two lives forever. The night a father's betrayal became a daughter's liberation. The night a vampire king found his queen. The night that proved, beyond any doubt, that love could conquer even the darkest circumstances and transform them into something luminous and lasting and true.